Shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Go ahead and have a seat, make yourself comfortable. If you do us a favor, state your name for the record and then spell it for us.
Caralyn Ordonez, Caralyn Ordonez.
Ms. Ordonez, where do you work and what do you do?
I am employed with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation in the Division of Forensic Sciences, also known as the State Crime Lab or the GBI Crime Lab.
How long have you been doing that?
About 7.5 years.
What's your educational background?
I have earned a Bachelor of Science in Forensic Science and a minor in Chemistry from the University of Central Florida. Since being employed by the GBI, I have completed a 20-week National Latent Print Examiner Training Academy in Mississippi, as well as the Latent Print Processing and Latent Print Examination training housed at the GBI Crime Lab. All of this training took about 3 years to complete, and since then I have been partaking in continuous education with different courses and classes throughout the years.
You mainly deal with fingerprints, is that?
Yes, I am a Latent Print Examiner.
I can turn you down.
Thank you, Judge. I apologize. If you would, just kind of tell the jury what you have to do, what type of training. We've heard about some of your training, but kind of just in layman terms, tell us what type of training you have and how do you identify fingerprints?
So with fingerprints at the GBI, we do provide in-house training. So I did have external and internal training on fingerprints, which took about 3 years to complete. But as a latent print examiner, I do both latent print processing and latent print examination. So that includes processing physical evidence for the presence of latent prints, as well as photographing any prints that may be developed on those items. I also am trained in taking known and post-mortem impressions, as well as comparing any latent prints. So that's unknown origin prints, meaning we don't know who they belong to, comparing those latent prints to known prints or known individuals. I also utilize the Automated Fingerprint Identification System, that is AFIS, that's the Georgia Fingerprint Database, as well as the FBI's Next Generation Identification System, that is the FBI's database. Both of those are fingerprint databases that we can utilize to try and make an identification on fingerprints. I also will write up my results in official reports and testify in court when subpoenaed.
To get your job, did you have to take any tests or was it competitive in any way?
Yes, so prior to working at the GBI, we did have to have a bachelor's degree in a scientific field. And then with application to the GBI, we had to successfully complete a visual acuity test. That's essentially looking at each individual's visual acuity to see if you can distinguish between different or minute differences in images and stuff like that. As well as throughout training, we had several different kinds of tests, both oral, practical, hands-on tests, and then written examinations as well.
In your job, you don't have a badge or carry a gun or anything like that, do you?
I do have a badge, but it's just a civilian badge, just saying that I work for the GBI Crime Lab, but I don't have a gun and I'm not a sworn law enforcement officer.
You don't normally go out to crime scenes or talk to witnesses or do anything like that, do you?
I do not. I only work in the crime lab.
And where's your office at? Where's it actually located?
We are located down in Decatur.
And if we could see your office, what would it look like?
My office itself is a cubicle. There's a few of us that share an office. There's a few cubicles in each office, and then we also have the laboratory, which is where we will process all of our evidence.
So you're one of what I consider a CSI type scientist for the GBI, is that right?
I'm not a CSI.
But you are a scientist, I guess, or in the field of science?
Yes, I am a forensic scientist.
And how many fingerprints do you think you've examined in your career?
I don't keep track of a specific number, but easily several thousand, both throughout training and now with having worked several hundred cases.
And how many of those in a year do you actually do? Just trying to do examinations for law enforcement or things like that?
Casework, I complete roughly 20 to 25 cases a month, and each case can involve anywhere from 1 to 200 latent prints that involve comparison. So really it does vary, but I have looked at several thousand latent prints and comparative prints as well.
And is the GBI a professional organization that they're accredited by another organization?
Yes, we are.
And who is that?
The GBI Crime Lab is accredited by ANAB. It stands for the American National Standards Institute National Accreditation Board.
Do you have to do any continuing education as part of your job?
Yes, I do.
Tell us about that if you would, please.
With being a forensic scientist, especially in the field as itself, but also within GBI policy, we do have to have continuous education. So we are continuously taking different courses, whether it be online or in person, throughout each year.
Do organizations, agencies, other people in criminal justice, do they ever rely on you for training or opinions just to help with what they do or cases?
Yes, we do work with several agencies, both with if they have any kind of case questions on how they would handle something or how we would handle something, as well as we do help with training as well.
And have you ever testified as an expert before?
Yes, I have.
How many times?
13 times.
Just this time I'm going to tender the witness as an expert in latent fingerprints examination.
No objection.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, we've got that out of the way, so let's quickly go to why you're here today. Did you have an opportunity to examine the knife in this case?
Yes, I did.
And that's the knife's been tendered already. It's actually State's Exhibit 83. Judge, may I approach?
Yes.
I'm going to show you, just kind of hold the box up and open it. This is the knife in the case. And if you can, the only thing I want to do is, I believe, there it is. What is that number there? I'm pointing to in the box of this knife.
It is the GBI Crime Lab case number.
And what is the number that's on the sticker here on the box?
It is the GBI Crime Lab case number and item number specifically.
Is that the same one you report?
Yes, it is.
Tell the jury what the DOFS case number is and how we track things.
In this case, the DOFS case number is 2020-10314555. And in our laboratory, each case is given a GBI Crime Lab case number. And each item that is submitted in that crime lab has a specific item number. So in this case, the knife was item 10, and so it's given a barcode with that listed GBI case number and item number. With that barcode, we are able to track the chain of custody, so anytime it moves between an individual in the lab or a storage location, we are scanning that barcode so that it can constantly be tracked as to where it is from the moment we receive it to the moment we release it back to the agency.
Here, may I approach the witness?
Yes.
I'm handing you what's been marked State's Exhibit 99. I think that's your report, is that right?
Yes, it is.
Judge, I tender the evidence now, State's Exhibit 99.
No objection. It's admitted.
And may I publish it, Your Honor?
Yes.
All right, let me ask you a question. What date did you issue this report?
This report was issued on February 18th, 2021.
All righty. Can you see that?
Yes.
It states 99 on the screen. And so we've got the DOFS case number on the top right, is that correct?
Yes, that is.
And then below that should report date, is that right?
Correct.
And then it's, what is the requested service?
The requested service was LP processing, so that's latent print processing on the item submitted.
And then it was requested by the Canton Police Department.
That's correct.
And then we have agency requested by, then subjects and victim under the case individuals.
That's correct.
And what date did you receive the knife in this case?
The evidence was submitted to the GBI Crime Lab on December 11th, 2020. That is not the date that I specifically received it. That's the date that it was submitted to the GBI Crime Lab for testing.
And then we have your expert opinion in this case is what?
Based on latent print processing of this item, I physically and chemically processed it for latent prints with negative results, meaning that there were either no latent prints present on that item or those that were did not have the potential to be suitable for comparison.
And what I want to ask about that is sometimes when we try just to see if we can get prints off or things like that, and in this case we have the knife submitted to you. Tell the jury first, what is a fingerprint and what things are you looking for, and then why sometimes even when you know someone may have a knife, you don't find a fingerprint on the item.
So going back to what is a fingerprint, on the palms of your hands and soles of your feet, you have a type of skin called friction ridge skin. So it contains raised portions called ridges, which form different patterns. For example, the pattern on the top joint of your hand or your finger is referred to as your fingerprint. Those ridges don't flow continuously across the surface, however, they form different ridge characteristics. For example, a ridge that flows and suddenly stops is referred to as a ridge ending, whereas a ridge that flows and splits into two, similarly to a fork in the road, is referred to as a bifurcation. So those different ridge characteristics are what I am looking at during my processing, but particularly that's what I'm looking at during my examination to see if I can use those ridge characteristics in a comparison and ultimately make a conclusion of identification or exclusion. With the fingerprints, a latent print, so we use the terms latent print and known print. A latent print is an unintentional or a chance reproduction of those ridge characteristics on the skin when you touch or handle an item. A latent print is not always visible to the naked eye, so it requires us to process it using different chemical techniques in order to render it visible, then allowing us to preserve it and examine it for comparison. Whereas known prints are those that are intentional reproductions of the ridge characteristics on the skin, and those are collected for comparative purposes to any latent prints that are collected at the scene. What was your follow-up question afterwards?
Sometimes, why would you not find a fingerprint? What can get in the way or cause a fingerprint? Even though if you know someone held a knife, it may not be there.
There are several factors that can play into whether a print is left on an item at the time it's handled, as well as if it may be developed later on or not. In regards to if a print is left at the time of being handled, some of the factors to consider is whether if there is even some kind of transferable material, either on the skin or on the item being touched. So on that friction-ridged skin, it is lined with pores, which are constantly producing sweat. So that sweat on the friction-ridged skin is what is deposited when you handle an item. If there is no sweat or a residue on the skin when you touch an item, you may not be leaving a fingerprint on the surface, or if you are, it may be too fragmented for us to be able to work with it. So there has to be some kind of transferable material, either on the skin itself or on the item. And when I say a transferable material on the item, if you have blood, grease, paint, even something really dusty, if you have that on the surface and you touch that surface, you can essentially do a takeaway print where you're removing whatever's on that item and you can leave friction ridge detail as well. So as long as there's some kind of transferable material, you can typically leave a fingerprint on an item. Another factor to consider is the item itself, if it is even conducive to accepting latent prints. For example, a surface that is dirty or very rusty may not be as conducive to accepting prints, as well as an item that is very textured versus an item that's very smooth. The smoother surface, typically the better a latent print may be left on that surface. As well as if the surface is hot or cold, wet or dry, dirty versus clean, all of that can affect if a print is left on the surface. In regards to if a print is developed after handling, one factor to consider is the environment. If it's left out in humidity, if it's hot versus cold, that can evaporate some of the latent print and essentially evaporate any detail that's left in that print, as well as if it was wet versus dry. So if it did rain on that item or if it was thrown into some wet environment, that can essentially damage or remove some of that latent print detail, as well as how the item was handled both at the time it was touched as well as after. So if you touch an item and it's a clean touch and release, you may leave a fingerprint, as opposed to an item that's handled a lot, where if you're moving your hand around a lot on it while using it, or a door handle, where many individuals are constantly using that, so that with door handles or type surfaces like that, it's constantly being handled, so you're constantly damaging or removing latent prints that may be present on that item. So there are several factors that could play into whether a print is left at the time that it's handled, as well as if a print is even developed afterward.
And on this knife, you didn't find any prints, is that right?
That's correct.
Nobody's, not the defendants, no one else. You found no prints whatsoever?
Correct. There were no latent prints developed on the item.
And whether or not a fingerprint could be there, it could be because of the type of material, like the knife itself was made out of, could have a factor?
Yes, it could be the knife itself, or in this case, there was a reddish-brown residue on the knife, so that could interfere also with any latent prints that may be present.
So blood or a lot of blood can interfere with the leaving of a fingerprint?
That's correct.
Just that's all I have.
I don't have any questions of this witness.
Thank you. You can step down. Call your next witness, please.
Caralyn Ordonez.